Hello math students, this is Miss Trapp, and today we are going to be looking at graphing linear equations in slope-intercept form. A linear equation is an equation for a straight line. This equation, as you can see here, is y is equal to mx plus b, where m is our slope and b is our y-intercept. The different pieces of the equation, besides m and b and including, y is how far up, which you can see on our graph here, the y. X is how far along, which you can see here. M, like we said in the equation, is the slope, which is how steep the line is. So if we look at the line, we can see from here we are going up 2 and over 1. So this means that our slope must be 2. The b, which is the y-intercept, is where the line crosses the y-axis. So you can see here that the line is crossing the y-axis at 1, just right there. Here's an example. In our slope-intercept form, y is equal to mx plus b, we're going to do the example y is equal to 2x plus 1. First, let's identify our slope, which is m, and our y-intercept, b. Looking at the equation, you can see that 2 is our slope, and our y-intercept, b, is 1. All right, let's get rid of that here. So now, first we want to graph. Since we want to graph this equation, let's first make the table so we can have our x and y points for graphing. So we are going to choose the x values, -2, -1, 0, and 1. Those, I know a misconception for students can be, where did those points come from? If you were to make the table on your own and didn't have them, I just picked them. You could use 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, really any points, but what I like about this is it has a couple of negative points, 0, and a positive point. So when you are graphing, you can use these points really for any equation. So we need to plug in -2, -1, 0, and 1 into our equation for x here to find our y. So when we take 2 times -2 plus 1, we get -3. When we take 2 times -1 plus 1, we get -1. When we plug in 0 and have 2 times 0 plus 1, we get a +1. And when we plug in 1 to x, we get 2 times 1 plus 1, which is +3. So let's take a look here and identify on our table the slope and the y-intercept. You can see the slope by looking at our y tables. We can see that we are going up 2 each time. And our slope is 2. Our rate of change is 2. We can identify the y-intercept because the y-intercept on the table is always where x is 0. So we can see that right here. You can see the y-intercept in the equation because it's in the b place. On the table, you can see the y-intercept when x is 0. Now we can plot our points. Our first point is -2, -3. We look at our graph. When we go over to the -2 on the x-axis and down -3, we can plot our first point. Our second point is -1, -1. We can go over 1 and down 1 and plot the point. Our y-intercept point is 0, 1. So we don't go anywhere on the x-axis, but we go up 1 on the y. And our next point, 1, 3, we go over 1 on the x-axis and up to 3 on the y-axis. Draw our line through, and we have our straight line. To identify the slope and the y-intercept, we can see that we are going up 2 places and over 1 each time. Up 2, over 1, 2, over 1. The y-intercept, we can see, is where it is 1 on the y-intercept and at the point 0, 1, which is right there. Our example 2 is y is equal to -2x minus 1. So let's look here to find our slope and our y-intercept. Looking at the equation, we can see that -2 is our slope and our y-intercept is -1. Looking at the table, let's plug in our x values into the x place so we can find our y values. -2 times -2 minus 1 is a positive 3. -2 times -1 minus 1 is a positive 1. -2 times 0 minus 1 is -1. And -2 times positive 1 minus 1 is a -3. Looking at our table, we can identify the slope and the y-intercept. First, for the slope, we can see that we are going down 2 each time, which is our slope. For the y-intercept on the table is when x is 0. So, when x is 0, we can see that y is -1, which is our y-intercept. Now to plot these points, we have -2, 3. So we go over to -2 on the x-axis and down 3. I'm sorry, -2, positive 3. So we would go up to the 3. Then we have -1, positive 1. So we go over to -1 and up 1. Our y-intercept is 0, -1, which is here. And our last point is 1, -3. So we go over to positive 1 on the x-axis and down -3. And there is our line. We can identify the slope and the y-intercept on our graph by looking here that we are going down 2 points and over 1, down 2, over 1, down 2, over 1. And our y-intercept is at the point 0, -1, and we know that it is -1 on the y line, which is right there. What we've learned today is how to graph linear equations in slope-intercept form, how to create a table and a graph, and how to identify the slope m and our y-intercept b in the equation, table, and the graph.